Hey everybody, welcome back. Well, the ES is just hanging in there. We can see pretty clearly that 50.91. Not a lot of value I'm going to add by pointing this out. So we're not going to spend a lot of time there, but we are going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in this rotation. We've got some goofy stuff happening after hours. We definitely have to talk about VKTX, what business Apple's getting out of, what business Apple's getting into. We definitely have to go through that. I got asked a lot of questions about these Bitcoin trades and these 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. trades. So I'm going to walk you through specifically exactly what I do so that you can do it for yourself. But I do just want to point out the obvious. You can see that the NQ is just, you're forming a little flag here. We can say anything we want, but this is what's going on. We're seeing the rotation. We talked about this rotation and how it was happening with the RTY, and we discussed this. We went over it in Saturday's video, that this was probably where we were going, and we could see the inflows heading this way, and then this is exactly what's happening. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but the important thing is to try to understand why this is happening, and really what we're seeing. And again, that was 2 weeks ago, but you have to remember all these videos are connected and that sometimes it takes a little time. RSP hitting that 2-year high and it's still grinding higher. I do think it's important to note a couple things before we jump into it, and we're going to jump right into it. XBI is breaking out. You're seeing a lot of these names like VKTX. They are just crushing. Let me get to that. VKTX. And they're just absolutely crushing and they're just exploding. And we're going to cover it. We're going to talk about why this is happening and what's going on. Most importantly, it took the whole sector up. So we want to watch the LABU. I'll just tell you that ahead of time. You're going to want to watch this. A lot of people are thinking that this is over. And what we started to see, and we were talking about this, especially in the community, that you're seeing this divergence where LABU and XBI was only moving because it was interest rate sensitive. And that's no longer the case, is it? So now we're having different kinds of moves. And by different kinds of moves, what we're really starting to see is we're starting to see this decoupling from interest rates in XBI. And that's based upon when you start to have companies like this that are coming out and crush. And today their drugs being called basically best in class, and it's only in phase 2, which I thought was kind of interesting language. Rumor is Lilly had a chance to buy them and they haggled over price. So we'll see how that plays out. But the other one we talked about was XLI. And we've seen how the dollar is going higher. And usually when a higher dollar does not lead to what? Does not lead to XLI going higher. But we're seeing that decoupling as well. Bitcoin, we're seeing some really interesting moves with it continuing to push higher. And as it's pushing higher, what's it doing? It's taking certain names up with it and it's dropping other names. And I think we should discuss that in detail. But I really want to show you how we do this trade. And then we're going to get into Apple, VKTX, and some of the other names that you should be watching after hours so you can prep for tomorrow. But if you follow this, and you might want to watch it a couple times, you'll be able to do exactly what we do, or exactly what I do, and then you'll be able to implement it and make it yours. So take a look. So in front of us is an account that I use for overnight holds. And I'm going to show you that this is what I made by just implementing this strategy. And I want to show you this strategy, and I also want to link it to how we knew to short coin today, but because it involves those trades. But this, the portfolio here, hopefully, or you might not even notice, but the color is darker there. And the reason for that is because I blocked out the account number because you don't need to know that. And then I blocked out something here that was also would denote this account. So all I'm doing here is just showing the daily P&L. There's something in here now that's unrealized. And this is what we realized on the day. And it's probably up a little more. I'm actually recording this while I'm in the middle of trading. So you might see me look at the other screens while I'm doing this. But I want to get this out. And I'm trying to get these out at 5 o'clock because you guys have made it pretty clear, like, sooner's better. Like, please get these out as soon as you can. So that's what I've been trying to do. Now, in regards to this P&L, we're just going to focus on this. You're at 16.3 unrealized because something's in the account. And then this is where you're out unrealized 15.6. All right, so how did we get here? And this is a completely different strategy, in my opinion, and how I run the world of my day trading. And let me just explain that real quickly. Depending upon what's going on, I break my accounts up into sectors. So I will have a sector that will be solely day trading. Then I'll have a sector that will be swing trading. Then I'll have an account that is long-term trading. And I find out that this works for me for compartmentalizing. So for example, if this is long-term trading, this might be special situations that I'm doing that are just M&A. And these could just be things that I'm seeing that I want to do, like overnight holds could just be in here. And then this could just be option trades. And then all these different accounts, when I trade, they're all affected by this. So for our purposes, I won't bring it out, but everything's affected by the stool. So macro fundamentals and technicals will change how I'm trading, right? So I might be doing 25% of my trading might be day trading, and then 25 could be swing trading. 25 could be long-term trading, and then the rest could be, whatever. It could be special situations, options, mergers, acquisitions, that kind of stuff. Or it just depends. Could be, stocks trading under cash value. There's a bunch of those right now. It could be things like that. But more importantly, these percentages change and the account values might change and where I move money. Usually I don't do that, but it could happen if something extreme happened. But it depends on what's going on macro, fundamental, and technically. If I'm in a low environment where the market to me looks like it's bottoming, then I don't really want to day trade. I want to do long-term trading. If we're in an environment that looks frothy, I want to do more day trading. I don't even want to do swing trading. I just want to make what I can get and get out of the way. So I hope that makes sense. And so what I found for my ape-like brain is to separate the accounts and compartmentalize. And it works for me. Because what that does for me is if I'm in a long-term NVIDIA trade like I am, I bought NVIDIA last May. I day trade NVIDIA a lot. Now, I might want to get cute one day. But if that's in a separate account that I don't really look at or just look at the end of the day, I look at all my accounts at the end of the day. But then I don't have to think about it the same way, right? I'm thinking about it differently because why I bought it is completely different. But that's a video for another time. If you want me to get into how I compartmentalize this and why in greater detail, this is what works for me. It might not work for you. You might go, this is exhausting. I have no interest in this. But let me get to why I'm showing you this. But I just think that's important for people to get. Now, the purpose of me showing you this is this MARA trade, this MSTR trade, and this MSTR trade were all placed, okay? And there's your profits on those. They were all placed upon what we saw happen at the end of yesterday. I want to show you what I saw at the end of yesterday so you can replicate this for yourself. So you will actually be able to do exactly what I did. I'm going to show you exactly how I did it and how I did this. Very similar to how I showed you the other week how I was able to determine that NVIDIA was the way to go and not SMCI. But let's get to it. So I want to show you also how we knew that coin was going to come in. And I actually placed this in the wrong account, but it actually worked out well today showing this portfolio versus one of the other ones. But it works actually well because I can tie it right into this trade, which I walked through and I actually was teaching it why we were actually trading it, making money. But here, take a look at this and I'm going to give you the criteria. All right, so the first part of the criteria, the very first part of the criteria is that you want to look at the underlying asset that you're doing this with. Now, the underlying asset in many cases could just be the S&P and the outperformance of a stock. In our case, it was Bitcoin and what Bitcoin was doing. So again, the underlying asset. So it can be the S&P, and then you can go look at the stocks, and then you could watch how NVIDIA is closing after earnings, like i.e. here, how we did the trade, and go from there. In the case that we're going to go through, it was Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the underlying asset. Okay, so if Bitcoin's the underlying asset, and excuse me if you see my eyes dart, I'm actually trading a little bit while we're doing this. So I'm trying to get these out, as I stated earlier, at 5. Because I got a lot of comments like, hey, can you please get these out earlier? Which I get. But sometimes the answer is no, I'm still trading. So anyway, let's just keep rocking and rolling. So, all right, so we see right in here and we could see the trend and we could see the break. All right, so everybody sees this break. So out of this move, what did you have yesterday from when you open, from whence you open to here? You had about 4%, right? You had a decent move. Okay, so out of that move, you want to look at how it affects the underlying securities. So for our purposes, we're going to drop Bitcoin and we're going to make it a line chart. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take coin, we're going to take Riot, MSTR, BITI, and we're going to pop them all in, okay? Just so we have an understanding of what they are. Now, BITI, for those that don't know, it's a short. All right, but we're just going to throw it in there just to get a sense of what's going on. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drop this into a 5-minute chart. All right, and what we're going to have to do, just so you can get this, is we're going to have to go back to this day, right? Just that day. We're not going to go any further and look at this, but let's watch this play out. So the first thing that you'll notice is right off the rip, MSTR and MARA are crushing it, right? So we already know where the strength is. We already know that Monday off the rip, we already know where the strength is. We already know where Bitcoin is. We already know that BITI is dropping like a stone. But the outperformance that we're seeing is where? The outperformance we're seeing is MSTR and MARA. Okay, so we know where the outperformance is. Now, if we continue to just watch it play out, 130. Now, MARA, MicroStrategies, coins coming up, Riot's coming up, but they're still all above what? The underlying asset. See how it starts to turn right here? Okay. So now you have the end of the day right there at 350. We'll pull this over. And what's happening here? They're starting to turn a little bit, right? They're starting to map themselves up, but Mara's still leading, they're still up. And the one thing that you're always looking for, and just remember this one thing about what I want to go over, it must be greater than the percentage of the underlying asset. So if it's the S&P and your stock's up 1%, but the S&P was up 3%, it doesn't work the same way. If Bitcoin's up 10% and the underlying assets are up 5%, it doesn't work the same way. It's got to be greater. If it's not greater, then it's an issue. All right. Please keep that in mind. Now that we know that these assets are outperforming, what we do is we just simply drill into the charts. And what we would do then is just pick the ones that we like the most. I tend to avoid coin for a bunch of reasons, because I do think that there's still litigation risk. I know a lot of people don't think there is. You never know with this SEC. So I tend to avoid that one. It doesn't really matter. It would have worked perfectly today with that, had you chosen that one or had you chosen Riot. Doesn't matter. So now you know where you are with the assets. So then you run through the trades. For me, MSTR is always a no-brainer. Why? Because MSTR actually owns the underlying asset, right? So however, and please remember this, however close you can get to the underlying asset, whether that is basic materials, whether that is, gold, however close you can get to the underlying asset that is outperforming the underlying asset is where you want to be. In this case, we can see very clearly MicroStrategy's completely outperformed the underlying asset. Okay. So now we have MicroStrategy's completely outperforming. So this is how MicroStrategy's closed a higher high. Well, that's important, right? So now we have the higher high on MicroStrategy's. You come and you take a look at Mara. Okay, Mara closed here, but not the higher high. But nonetheless, this was a really strong close, one of the strongest closes that we've had all year. So again, this fell in that category. Then we went and took a look at Riot. Riot couldn't even get anywhere near the previous high. Therefore, it was no longer a candidate. So now you're looking for the strongest stocks that were above, right? Then you can take a look at Coin. I'm not a fan of Coin, but Coin fit perfectly in here. It was actually the strongest of all the names. I just don't like trading it specifically because it's moving on the underlying asset, but really all it does is just trade the underlying asset, right? Okay, doesn't matter. Nonetheless, it would have worked perfectly. Now, that's the criteria. So then what you're doing is very simple. You're going long at 4 o'clock or you're going long at 8 o'clock. If you're doing options, it has to be 4. Right? I just do at the money weeklies and stock. I might do more stock at 8 o'clock if it's going well. So now that we understand this and we understand that criteria, the next thing we do is just watch the morning, because I'm going to explain to you when do you get out, right? That's going to be the next question. That'll be in the comments. So you want to look at a couple things. Number one, you always want to look at the 8 p.m. time frame and see how you did. Number two, you want to look at 4 a.m. when Asia gets access to our markets and how that acts. Number three, you want to look at 7 o'clock. What is retail doing that's coming in? Okay. You want to look at these levels. You want to open above them. If you're going to open above 7 o'clock and 4 o'clock, you might want to stay long and see how it goes. And that's pretty much what we did. And it played out perfectly. And we were actually able to get out up here. And there's a resistance point up here as well. 892, there's a resistance there. So that allowed us to stay in the trade with the options and with the stock as well. Please understand that when I show you accounts, I most likely have those positions in other accounts. And this is just me showing a snapshot of what I'm doing. I own some of this at, like, for example, MSTR for a much longer time frame idea. But this is just very simply so you can follow these kinds of trades. The live examples seem to be working better for people. All right, so now we have that figured out and you understand how to enter, and then you understand what you're supposed to be looking for. 8 p.m., 4 a.m., 7 a.m., make sure you're above all three before they open. If you're not, you probably want to kick it. Now, that's how you enter, and this is a rough estimate of how you exit. If you're live trading with us in the room, you already know that it can get a little more specific, but for our purposes, that's what we do. Now, how would you know that they're reversing? I will not keep everybody in suspense, but what we're going to do is just close MSTR, and we're just going to focus right here, right now, on Bitcoin for a moment. And what do we see happening here off the open? And what we can do is drop this to a 1, and we'll come all the way back to 930. What do you see happening here? Bitcoin staying higher, and what's Coinbase doing? You want to be out of these things when the underlying asset, is going stronger than your position. There's no need to be in them any longer. There's no technical level I need to point at. You just don't want to be in them any longer. If you're looking for where you would put the short on, this is where, and I'll show you in a second how we did this. But this also allows you to know where the strength is. For example, I said the one that we play a lot and the one that we buy is MicroStrategy's. There's a reason for that. There's an underlying asset there, and the company makes $500 million a year. right? And the underlying asset is usually what? It's usually discounted. So if you go and take a look at that, it's a very different looking chart than coin. And then if you go and take a look at Mara, it's a very different looking chart. It's a very different looking chart than Riot. So by looking at this right now, there's a couple things that you should be able to identify. Which one is the weakest, okay? Which one is the weakest and which one is the strongest? So this would show you why we play MicroStrategies more than any of these other names. It would also show you exactly when you should be getting out of these trades. Here, take a look at the coin short.
That is going to have a violent move. Coin. See the inside? I'll put money to work on the short side if I break that. I'll probably be in the form of puts. 202 3/4. I'm going to go set it up. If it breaks, it breaks. This needs to make a decision. Every way that this breaks is how that's going to go. That's the bet. So what you have is you see the long-legged doji, inside another long-legged doji, inside another long-legged doji. So you're at 205.80 and you're at 202 3/4. Whatever way that goes, that's usually how these things break. Can't get over the open. Say it. So you cannot get over the open. Not one bar, not one 15-minute bar is over that open. All right, so let's do it. Let's get involved. Just put this out there, please. I paid $680 for the 200 puts. I'll tell you what got me in it. Inside doji, inside that doji. This bar is still inside. All these bodies are all in these other bodies, right? And then on top of that, they did this to you. They made you think they were going to break out there, right? And then what'd they do? They dropped it. Oh, that's nice. Maybe I'll take some of that off. Let me just see where we're at here. They're at 830 already. So we're up 15% on those. If you want to take something off, go for it. Maybe I'll take some off here. See where you're at though? You're setting up to bounce, right? Bounce back up, retest. So that's why I'm saying if you want to pull something out, this is where you do it. Where are they now? $9. I took more off at $9. We're going to trim more of these. What did we get? 9. Okay. So I took more off at 9 and we'll go from there. I'll leave the rest on and that's it.
Retracement on the stock. So once we had that retracement, you can see that gap fill right there on the way down. We're pulling money out. And then usually what I do is I also do stock at the same time, or some people don't even do options. They just short stock, and you can do pretty much whatever you want there. But once it got to that level, you pretty much knew that that was the level that you wanted to watch, right? Because you're just seeing a lot of this stuff lately, gap fills. You're not trying to predict, like, is it going to crash? You know, what you're trying to do is, and people don't get this because they got through 2020, let's start there, where the market's nuanced. You're just not going to collapse. Like, you're just not going to automatically drop 30, 40 points in a day, right? So really what you're trying to look for is, like, where would that level, first level be? Well, first level of defense is where it closed. And that's usually what you see, and they refer to these as gap fills, and that's exactly what happened here, but you can see the timestamps. But also here, you can see during the day, what we're doing is I'm just putting this in observations like, hey, it hit, and they know what that means. They can do whatever they want with it, but then it's out there, and that's just VKTX, which we were playing with all day. But other than that, I guess the easiest thing to do is to comment on that. Is this helpful to watch how these trades are thought out, the process, everything? The more feedback you give me, the better. That's why these videos are coming out again at 5, because that was a big deal to everybody. So I'm making an effort to get them out there. It's why I'm showing the P&L. I really didn't want to get into all that, but it seems like people actually seeing the trades and how they actually play out real time is very helpful. So I'll keep posting it, but you keep commenting and let me know. Also, please share, because I purposely do not run ads. There's nothing worse than trying to watch something and learn from something and then seeing ads pop up, but it does affect the algorithm. So if you can just think about it as like a fee, if you get something out of it, just post it, share it. That way we get more and more people informed on what it actually takes to be successful at trading. Now, at the time of filming this, VKTX did do a secondary. I don't think anybody should be shocked that they are actually doing a secondary, considering they have no revenue. And they have a drug that is now being called, quote, best in class comparison to Eli Lilly, which is saying a lot. It really is saying a lot. So we'll see how this goes, but it's a monster move on this name, and there's very little to say about it. Now, it came down very little on the secondary, and that's the one thing I really want to share with you, is that you hardly moved. They said we're going to do a secondary. Everybody must have known they were going to do a secondary. They have no money. They literally have zero in revenue. What was interesting about this, it was just a very simple trade, and I would watch this level again tomorrow. Watch this VWAP, and then watch what happens when we put the extended on, and we go exactly. I thought this was really neat. Watch what happens when you go right here. Look at how that VWAP and those both met. So all those people, they just followed all day long. And after you got above, here you had the test, the retest, and then when you went, you finally pushed. I wouldn't sleep on this. I think the secondary will be oversubscribed, and I think the muted move that you're seeing is telling you exactly what's going to happen. So I think it's definitely worth paying attention to again tomorrow. Another name that is finally getting into the game that we should pay attention to, obviously, is Apple. And we may have seen this, or you may not have seen this, but Apple is getting out of the electric car business and in the AI business. So Apple is canceling the work on their EV. They're getting out of the electric car business and they're moving all the staff to an AI project. You can see the timestamp here at 2/26, February 27th. Always good to have like a Google scan that can just pop up and show this stuff if you don't have, if you don't have like Bloomberg or you don't have access to, instant information. But I think that's very important. And now this is from Bazinga. I don't really care who you use. I'm just using them because of, they have it all like spelled out pretty nicely, but I don't really care which one of these services you use. You can use any one of them. They do a pretty good job, but they're usually kind of late to the party if you look at the time, but it's very concise. Like they tell you exactly what's going on. They're just not on it. Like they're not fast. I'll leave it at that, but they are concise. So Apple abandons electric car project to focus on generative AI, working on electric vehicle for years. No kidding. Has pumped the brakes on the Apple car ambitions, abandoned its EV development. Billions and billions, right? 2,000 employees working on the project. Two executives told Stanford that Apple will shift the employees from EE development to the company's generative AI divisions. Layoffs are still expected. Not sure how many. Long-awaited electrical vehicle has been pushed back multiple times. We all are aware of this. What's nice about this is now Tesla might actually benefit from this and the stock might actually go higher. But more importantly for me is that they were spending hundreds of millions of dollars in R&D on this thing. And it was just basically, let's just call it what it was. It was just a boondoggle. I don't know what you guys call it these days in age. I'm only in my 40s, but we call it a boondoggle. And them getting into AI, it's a really nice way to go. And AI demand has helped fuel the recent market rally at the beginning of the month. Deepwater Asset Management, Gene, said that believe Apple's asleep at the wheel when it comes to AI, but they are wrong. Muncher calls Apple one of the most unappreciated AI plays in the market. Tech analyst says he expects Cupertino to release its own AI foundation model sometime in June. Considering what's going on with Google and all the backlash that Google's getting, and Microsoft is not getting that much, but for some reason they're tying Microsoft to it. I'm not sure why. I think that this is really important for Apple and that it's very interesting how this is playing out. Now, you have this major resistance line and you held. Take a look at this move. And I think that this move is pretty substantial and worth paying attention to. I'm going to get rid of the pre and the post just so we can stay focused. And what we're going to see here is pretty clear. So what I did was I just dropped an anchored VWAP to when the news hit. And you can see it's never broke that level. And then I just dropped one from the peak to see if it was ever going to get above there. And look where it is after hours. It's above there. So we'll have to see how this plays out tomorrow. But this is definitely one, candidly, I would not sleep on. And and I'm not a huge Apple fan. I mean, everybody knows how I feel about the what's going on with that headset right now. But if they can get away from the nonsense, I mean, nobody wants that thing. Nobody wants to walk around like that. But if they can get away from that and start focusing their energies on the things that people actually want, that will make people's lives better, become that innovation company again, that could be absolutely huge for the company. And I think that one gentleman, Gene, he might be onto something here. That's it.